The courtroom felt colder than I expected, the air thick with tension, as I sat on the edge of the hard wooden chair, my fingers clutching the armrest. My heart hammered in my chest, each beat loud enough to drown out the voices murmuring around me. It was a feeling I knew too well, a tightness in my throat, a knot in my stomach. But today it was different. Today the weight of 1,000 decisions, 1,000 years of regret hung heavy in the room. I could feel every pair of eyes on me, the ones that weren't just observing the case, but trying to decipher the woman who had built her empire on the bones of a broken family. I was no stranger to judgment, but this was new. This was real. The room was packed, filled with onlookers, reporters, and whispers. The cameras snapped their cold lenses, catching every minute shift in my posture, every glance I cast toward my niece. Eva, sitting across from me, looked as composed as ever. Her sharp eyes glinted under the harsh fluorescent lights, but I could see the cracks. Beneath the poised exterior, I knew the storm was brewing. I had raised her from a child, taught her everything I could fought for her when no one else would. And yet, here we were, sitting across a courtroom as enemies, strangers even. Her lawyer, a slick, polished woman named Sophie Lancaster, had that air about her, the kind of air that told you she wasn't here just to win. She was here to break me. The judge, a man with graying hair and eyes that seemed to carry the weight of every case he'd ever heard, cleared his throat, his gavel ringing out, cutting through the silence. "We are here today to settle the custody dispute of one Eva Bishop." He began, his voice slow and deliberate. "The case has been presented, and it's now time to hear from the parties involved." The words hit me like a wave. Custody dispute. The phrase sounded so clinical, so detached, as if it was just a simple matter of who owned what. But this wasn't about ownership. This was about my heart, my soul, the very love I had poured into this girl for years. "Margaret Bishop, you are the guardian of Eva Bishop's estate." The judge said, his voice steady but not unkind. "Please present your side." The room was so still you could hear a pin drop. It was my moment, the one I'd been dreading and anticipating for months. I stood slowly, my knees creaking under the weight of everything I was about to say. The envelope in my hand felt like lead, the weight of its contents, pushing against my skin. Inside were the documents, the truth that no one wanted to hear, but that had to be said. As I approached the stand, my eyes flickered to Eva, sitting there in her impeccable suit, her red lips pressed tight. The girl who once called me Mom, the girl I had fought for when no one else would. Now she sat there like a stranger. I cleared my throat and began. "Your Honor." My voice wavered at first, but I forced it to steady. I didn't raise Eva because it was easy. I didn't raise her to get credit or accolades. I raised her because she was my responsibility. When she was left on my doorstep alone and broken, I made a promise to her that I would give her the life she deserved, even if that meant sacrificing everything. I felt my breath catch in my throat, but I pushed through it. For 13 years, I fought for her. For 13 years, I've been the one to sit through parent-teacher conferences, to hold her hand when she was sick, to answer every phone call, every question, every fear. And I did it all without ever asking for a thing in return. I paused, looking down at the envelope, the harsh yellow color of it, taunting me. This was my last chance to show them what I'd done for her, what I'd done for my family. "You want to talk about custody? Fine. Let's talk about it." I raised the envelope, holding it in the air like a banner. "But before we do, I need you to know this. Eva signed away her rights to this estate. She signed it away when she couldn't handle the weight of motherhood, when she couldn't keep her promises. And she did it without me even asking." My voice cracked, but I didn't stop. I didn't steal anything from her. I did what I had to do. I took care of those children when she left them behind. There was a murmur in the courtroom, a ripple of disbelief and judgment. Eva's lawyer, Sophie Lancaster, stood quickly, her heels clicking sharply against the marble floor. "Objection, Your Honor," she said, her voice smooth but cutting. "The personal matters of the family are irrelevant to the estate in question. This is about legal ownership and nothing more." The judge nodded, motioning for her to sit down. Sustained. "Mrs. Bishop, please stick to the facts at hand." But the facts were the truth. They were the years of sacrifice, the nights spent awake worrying about whether Eva was safe or whether she was lost to her demons. The years of wondering if she would ever come back, wondering if I would ever be enough. The facts were the empty chair at Thanksgiving dinners, the silence that stretched for years. The facts were the pain of loving someone so deeply, only to be abandoned without a word, without a second glance. I continued, my voice growing steadier with each word. "I'm not here to tear Eva down, and I'm not here to play games. I'm here because she needs to know the truth, and this court needs to understand why I did what I did. I wasn't trying to steal her life. I wasn't trying to rob her of anything." I glanced over at Eva. I was trying to give her a chance at a better one. The documents in this envelope, they prove that. They prove that Eva didn't just leave them behind. She signed away her right to them. Eva's face went pale as I spoke, her hands trembling at her sides. The tears that had been threatening to spill in her eyes finally broke free. She didn't say anything, didn't try to interrupt, but I knew she understood. And even if she couldn't admit it yet, deep down she knew this wasn't just about inheritance. It was about the truth of what she had done and the damage that truth had done to both of us. I stood there in the heart of that cold courtroom, holding the envelope like it was the last thing I had left to offer. And maybe it was. As the court session stretched on, the weight of silence was nearly unbearable. The judge, his hand resting lightly on the gavel, leaned forward, his gray eyes never leaving me. The tension in the room was palpable, as though the air itself held its breath, waiting for the next revelation. I could feel the heat of the spotlight as it bore down on me, and for a brief moment, I felt the sting of doubt creeping in. Was I doing the right thing? Was I betraying the girl I once loved like my own? But no. I knew what I had to do. I raised the envelope higher, steadying my shaking hands, and caught the flicker of something in Eva's eyes. Something dark and desperate, as though the truth was unraveling in front of her, piece by piece, and she was powerless to stop it. The woman I had raised, the woman I had fought for in every corner of my life, was sitting across from me in that courtroom as a stranger, and that stranger was about to face the consequences of a decade's worth of decisions she had buried deep beneath the surface, decisions that had torn apart our family, and most of all, decisions that had nearly destroyed her. "Your Honor," I continued, my voice sharp but steady, cutting through the thick tension of the room. "I want to make it clear that what I did was not out of malice. It wasn't some desperate attempt to take control of something that wasn't mine. I raised Eva out of love, but love sometimes forces you to make the hardest choices, and it's never easy." My throat tightened, but I pushed forward. When Eva was a child, she was full of life. She had this spark, this light that made everything seem worth it. But that spark began to fade, and as she grew older, it was clear that the world wasn't kind to her. She was lost. I paused, my gaze drifting to the papers in my hand, the legal documents that had remained hidden for so long, tucked away in the depths of a drawer in my office, sealed in a yellowed envelope. For years, I had kept them locked away, afraid to face what they represented. But now the time had come. The courtroom was dead silent as I unfolded the first letter, its edges curling slightly from age. I had kept it in pristine condition, every word as sharp and fresh in my mind as when I first read it. The ink, though faded, still told the story of a mother who was lost long before she abandoned her children. I held the paper up, the crispness of it, almost mocking the softness of my voice as I spoke. This letter? I began glancing briefly at Ava, who shifted in her seat, her hands trembling. Was the first one I received from Ava after she left. This was back when she was struggling, when she disappeared for months without a word. I could hear the rustle of paper as I smoothed the letter out in my hands. In this letter, she writes about her life, about how things weren't working out, and how she couldn't do it anymore. She tells me that she was going to get help, that she needed time, but what she didn't tell me, what I couldn't know, was how far gone she was at that point, how lost she had become in her addiction, her anger, and her fear of the future. I paused, taking a deep breath. This was not easy. To speak of the woman I had loved, to expose her flaws like this, was like peeling open old wounds. But there was no other way. The truth had to be told. She asked me to take care of the children, to raise them as my own. At first, I thought it was just temporary, that she would come back. I was wrong. My voice faltered for a brief second, and as the months passed, I heard nothing. No calls, no letters, no visits. The children cried for her, but I couldn't help them understand why she was gone. I couldn't help them understand why their mother had abandoned them. I closed my eyes for a moment, the memory of those long nights flooding back, the late nights when I would hold them in my arms, rocking them to sleep, while I whispered promises that their mother would come back. But deep down, I knew she wouldn't. I knew that the girl I had raised had been lost to something much darker than I could have imagined. I continued reading the letter aloud. I'm leaving Mom. I can't do this anymore. I need to be with him. He's the only one who understands me. The words cut through the air, and I heard the soft intake of breath from the audience. The rawness of it, the coldness of the decision was impossible to ignore. I looked up from the paper to see Ava's eyes wide with shock, her face ashen. She was staring at the letter, her hands clenched in her lap, unable to move. That letter, I said, my voice growing quieter, was the moment I knew that she had abandoned us. She had made a choice. She chose to leave her children behind to start a new life with someone else. And in doing so, she signed away her right to be their mother. She made that decision when she chose him over them. She chose her own selfishness over her family. The room was still as a tomb. The whispers had stopped. Ava's lawyer, Sophie, stood with her arms crossed, her gaze fixed on me. But the disbelief in Ava's eyes was the hardest part. I could see her retreating into herself, as if the memories were too much to bear. But the truth was, they're laid bare for all to see. The truth was that Ava had chosen this path. She had walked away from her children, and I had been the one left to pick up the pieces. As I continued reading, I pulled out another letter, this one dated months later. In it, Ava told me that she had met someone, a man named Javier Dawson, and that she was moving to another city to start fresh. She begged me to keep the children for a little longer, but she was already making plans to leave them behind. She was already making plans to start a life without them. I never wanted this, I said softly, folding the letter and placing it back into the envelope. I never wanted to be in this position, but I had no choice. I had to protect those children. I had to be the one to step in when their mother disappeared. And for years, I did everything I could to make sure they were safe, loved, and cared for. I paused, locking eyes with Ava. And now, after all these years, you want to take them from me. After everything I've done for them, you come back for what? To play the hero, to take the inheritance. Ava shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her lips pressed tight, but she didn't speak. I could see the turmoil in her eyes, the conflict of wanting to explain herself, but knowing that the truth was too heavy to bear. I set the envelope down my hands, shaking from the emotion, from the weight of it all. Ava, I never asked for this. I never wanted to take your place, but you gave me no choice. You left, and I took your children in because I loved them, because they needed me. And now, after all these years, you're going to come in here and accuse me of kidnapping, of taking something that wasn't mine. The judge, who had been silent throughout, cleared his throat and glanced at the clock. "Mrs. Bishop," he said, his voice breaking through the tension in the room, "I think we've heard enough for now. We will reconvene tomorrow." But as I gathered my things and began to leave the stand, I couldn't help but feel the weight of the truth hanging between us. The truth was that Ava had abandoned us. The truth was that for all her talk of wanting to be a mother again, she had left when it mattered most. And the truth was that it didn't matter how many letters or apologies she wrote, it couldn't erase the years of absence. The damage had been done. Tomorrow we would face each other again. But for now, I knew I had done what needed to be done. As the door to the courtroom closed behind me, I felt the weight of what had just transpired settle on my shoulders like an unbearable burden. My legs felt weak as I walked toward the exit, my thoughts swirling in 1,000 different directions. I had laid bare the years of love sacrifice and pain, hoping to finally break through to Ava, hoping that somehow the truth would make her see the gravity of what had happened. But as I stepped out into the cold corridor, I realized that I wasn't just trying to convince the court or Ava. I was trying to convince myself. I was trying to convince myself that all the choices I had made, decisions that were so difficult, so gut-wrenching, had been the right ones. The silence in the hallway was deafening, but I couldn't escape the echoes of the trial that kept reverberating through my mind. The letters I had read aloud, the photographs of Ava's children in their most vulnerable state, those were not just pieces of evidence. They were fragments of a life that had been torn apart. And it was that life, the one I had fought to rebuild, that seemed to be slipping through my fingers once again. I stood by the window, staring out at the gray sky, the light dimming as the sun set behind the city's towering buildings. The cold air bit at my skin as I clutched my coat tighter around me, but it wasn't the chill of the evening that made me shiver. No, it was something far deeper. It was the realization that what had been done, what Ava had done, was irreversible. The damage had been done, and no matter how many times I told myself that I had done the right thing, there was no erasing the past. In the courtroom, I had watched Ava's face as I spoke, her expression flickering between disbelief, guilt, and rage. She'd been a stranger, someone I no longer recognized, someone who had become so consumed by the choices she had made that she couldn't even look me in the eye. And I understood why. She had spent the better part of her life avoiding the truth, avoiding the consequences of her actions. She had built a life around the lies she had told herself, and now the walls were crumbling down around her. The trial had been a reckoning not just for her, but for me too. I had held on to the hope that one day she would return to the children, return to me. I had told myself that maybe, just maybe, things could go back to how they were. But as I looked back on the years, the countless nights I had spent waiting for her to call for her to show up, I knew that hope had been nothing more than a fantasy. The reality was harsh, and the truth was undeniable. She had made her choice. She had chosen herself, her own life, over the children she had brought into this world. I closed my eyes, letting the memories flood in. The first time I held her as a baby, the way she had clung to me as a child. Her bright smile as we celebrated birthdays and holidays together. For a moment, I could almost hear her laughter, feel the warmth of those moments we had shared. But that was a different time, a time before everything fell apart, before she decided to walk away. It was hard to believe that the woman I had raised, the woman I had given everything for, was now sitting across from me in a courtroom fighting me for the right to claim the children she had abandoned. It was hard to believe that the love I had for her could be so easily overshadowed by the choices she had made. My mind wandered back to the day she had left us. I could still remember it so vividly as though it had happened just yesterday. I had been in the kitchen making tea when she had come to me, her face drawn and pale. She had told me that she couldn't do it anymore, that she needed to leave. And just like that, she had turned her back on us. No explanation. No apology, just a promise that she would be back soon, promises that, of course, were never kept. And yet here she was, now sitting in front of me, demanding answers, demanding the inheritance, demanding control of the life that had been ours for so long. But what she didn't understand, what she could never understand, was that her absence had created a void that no amount of money could fill. It was the absence, the years of silence, that had shaped who we were. And it was that absence that had forged a bond between me and her children, a bond that no one, not even her, could break. I turned away from the window and paced back toward the courtroom, my mind racing with the realization that I was running out of time to prove to Eva that what she was asking for was not just the inheritance. No, it was something far deeper, something she couldn't even name. She wanted the control, the power, the life she had abandoned, and she was willing to tear apart everything I had worked for to get it. And as much as I wanted to believe that she was doing this out of some misplaced sense of love, the truth was clear, she wasn't. She was doing this for herself to reclaim something she felt entitled to, something that didn't belong to her. I couldn't let her do it. I couldn't let her destroy everything we had built. When the doors to the courtroom opened again, I took a deep breath and stepped inside. The air was thick with anticipation, the tension rising as I took my place at the stand once again. This time, I wasn't just fighting for the children. I was fighting for the future, for the life we had built in her absence. And this time, there would be no turning back. The judge called the proceedings to order, his voice calm and steady. "Mrs. Bishop," he said, his gaze fixed on me. "We've heard a great deal today about the past. But now I need to hear from you. I need to know what you believe is best for these children. You've presented your case. You've presented your evidence. But now it's time to answer the one question that matters." I nodded, the weight of his words sinking in. This was it, the moment I had been waiting for, the moment when everything would come to light. I could feel the eyes of the room on me, waiting for me to speak, to defend everything I had fought for. But as I looked over at Ava, sitting there with her head bowed, her eyes fixed on the floor, I realized that no matter what I said, nothing could change the truth. The truth was that we had lived a life without her. And no matter how much she wanted to rewrite that history, the past would always be there, a constant reminder of the choices she had made. I began, my voice steady, but filled with emotion, that the best thing for these children is stability. They've been through enough already. They've been through enough loss, enough heartache. They don't need more. They don't need a mother who only shows up when it's convenient for her. They need someone who has always been there, who has loved them unconditionally, who has sacrificed everything for their happiness. I glanced at Arthur, Emily, and Andrea, their eyes on me, their faces filled with hope. "I am that person," I said softly, my heart swelling with pride. "And I will continue to be that person, no matter what happens here today." The room was silent, the weight of my words hanging in the air. Eva didn't move. She didn't speak, but I knew deep down that she understood. She understood that this wasn't just about inheritance. It was about something much more precious, the love and care that had shaped these children into the people they were today. The judge leaned back in his chair, his eyes never leaving me. "Thank you, Mrs. Bishop," he said quietly. "We'll take all this into consideration. This court is adjourned." As I left the stand, I felt a strange sense of peace settle over me. The battle wasn't over yet, but I knew that I had done everything I could. And in the end, that was all I could control. The future of these children. My grandchildren was now in their hands, and I would respect whatever decision they made, because no matter what happened next, I had given them the one thing I could unconditional love. The days following the trial were long drawn out, filled with an overwhelming silence that I had never known before. It wasn't the kind of quiet that offered peace. No, it was the kind of quiet that gnawed at the edges of your mind, the kind that made you question every word you had spoken, every decision you had made. The courtroom had been a battlefield, and though I had fought with everything in me, the echoes of those words, those truths laid bare for the world to see, still reverberated in my head. Eva's face, frozen in disbelief and anger, haunted me in the quiet moments. What was she thinking? What had she heard in the courtroom? The woman I had raised, the woman I had loved like my own, was now a stranger, and I couldn't shake the feeling that maybe I hadn't done enough. For the first time, I found myself questioning whether I had chosen the right path. I had fought for the children, fought for their future. But had I done enough to fight for Ava? Could I have done more for her when she was younger, when she had needed me most? Could I have somehow saved her from the path she had chosen? These questions gnawed at me as I sat alone in the quiet of my living room, looking out at the rain pouring down outside. The weight of everything hung heavy on my chest. The children were doing well better than I had dared hope after everything that had happened. Arthur was settling into his college life, adjusting to the rhythm of being away from home, though he always called or texted to check in. Emily was thriving at work, her confidence growing with each new challenge she took on. Andrea, as spirited as ever, had just been selected to lead her school's band, a role she had dreamed of for years. Despite the storm that had shaken us all, they were moving forward their lives, slowly taking shape into something good and hopeful. But still, my mind couldn't escape the truth of it all. My daughter, the woman who had once been my entire world, was now lost to me in a way that was irreversible. I had done everything I could for her, sacrificed so much of myself to raise her children, and yet she had chosen a different path. In the courtroom, when I had raised those letters, when I had revealed the documents that proved her abandonment, I had seen the terror in her eyes. But it wasn't just the fear of losing her children that haunted her. No, it was the realization that she had lost me. Lost the one person who had always believed in her, no matter how deep she had fallen into the darkness of her own choices. I stood up from my chair, my fingers lightly grazing the edges of the envelope I had left on the table. It was still there, its presence a reminder of the battle I had won. But winning didn't feel like victory. It felt like a hollow echo, an empty victory that was never meant to be celebrated. What had I won after all? The children were safe, yes. The future I had fought so hard to protect was secure. But at what cost? That night, I couldn't sleep. The weight of the decisions I had made felt even heavier in the dark, the silence of the house pressing in around me. I kept replaying the moments from the trial, the way I had spoken, the way the truth had spilled out like a torrent I could no longer stop. The anger in Ava's eyes had been palpable, her fury at me for what I had exposed. But what was I supposed to do? How could I have hidden the truth any longer, knowing what I knew? How could I have stood by and let her tear apart everything we had fought, for everything we had built together? I walked to the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water, the coolness of it refreshing against my dry throat. It was hard to swallow, though, as if the very act of drinking was a reminder of the emotional weight I carried. I had fought so hard for the children, for their future, but had I neglected my own sense of closure? What had become of me in all this? What had become of the woman who had once been so sure of her choices, so confident in her role as a mother and protector? The truth was that the years had taken a toll on me too. The sacrifices I had made had aged me in ways I hadn't expected. The sleepless nights, the worry, the constant fear that I might not be enough. It had all worn me down in ways I hadn't fully understood until now. I thought about the day she had left the last time I had seen Eva. The way she had stood at the door, the weight of the decision pressing down on her as she handed me the children, each one looking at her with a kind of desperate hope, a hope that she would come back, that everything would be okay again. But deep down, I had known. I had known she wouldn't come back. She was too far gone, lost in her own world, too consumed by her own demons to see what was right in front of her. And I had been the one to pick up the pieces to rebuild the shattered lives she had left behind. The phone rang, cutting through the stillness of the night. I glanced at the caller ID. It was Arthur. I hesitated for only a moment before answering. "Grandma?" His voice came through soft but steady. "Are you okay?" I smiled despite myself, the concern in his voice soothing something deep within me. "I'm fine, sweetheart." I replied, my voice betraying none of the doubt that lingered in my heart. "Just thinking about things." He didn't say anything for a long moment, and I could hear the distant sounds of traffic in the background, the hum of life moving forward, as it always did. Then finally he spoke. "I know this has been tough." He said his words measured wise beyond his years. "But I want you to know we're okay. We've always been okay. We've got each other, and that's what matters." His words struck me with the force of 1,000 truths. He was right. We had each other. That was what had always mattered, what had always been the constant in all this chaos. The bond we had was stronger than anything else. And maybe that was the real victory, not the court case, not the inheritance, but the love that had held us together. I took a deep breath, the weight on my shoulders easing just a little. "I know Arthur," I said, my voice thick with emotion. I just want you to understand why I did what I did. I want you to know that I did it for you, for all of you, and I hope one day you can see that." "We do," he replied, and I could hear the smile in his voice. "We do, Grandma. We see it, and we're grateful. We'll always be grateful." We talked for a few more minutes, and when we hung up, I felt a sense of peace that had been absent for so long. The future, no matter how uncertain, was still ours to shape. The trials of the past had forged us, had made us stronger, more resilient. And though the road ahead was still filled with challenges, I knew we would face it together as a family. The love we shared was unbreakable, a force that could weather any storm. The next day, as I sat at the kitchen table, I thought about Ava. I thought about the choices she had made, the life she had tried to rebuild. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something I hadn't expected: compassion. Compassion for the girl I had once known, the girl who had lost her way, who had made mistakes that couldn't be undone. She was still my daughter in a way, but the distance between us had grown too great. But perhaps, just perhaps, there was still hope for her. Maybe like me, she would come to understand that the real victory wasn't in reclaiming what had been lost, but in learning to forgive herself and move forward. As the days passed, I made my peace with the events that had unfolded. The courtroom battle was over, but the real work, healing, rebuilding, and finding a way to live with the truth was just beginning. And for the first time, I realized that I didn't need to carry the weight of the past any longer. What mattered now was the future we would build one step at a time together. I picked up the phone and texted Arthur. "We've got this, all of us." And as I hit send, I finally felt the peace I had been searching for. It was a week after the trial, and as I stood by the window, the weight of everything that had happened still felt like an anchor wrapped around my chest, dragging me down with each passing day. I had done what I could to secure the future of the children, to ensure their safety and happiness, but the emotional toll of the whole experience was something I wasn't sure I could fully understand, let alone explain. I had fought for them, for their future, for everything they deserved, but the cost of it, of exposing the truth, of watching Ava crumble under the weight of it all, was something I hadn't fully prepared for. As I gazed out at the city below, the sounds of life swirling in the streets, it struck me how the world kept moving forward. Life in all its brutal complexity didn't stop for anyone. It hadn't stopped for Ava when she'd left, and it hadn't stopped for me when I was left picking up the pieces. It had taken everything from me, but I had learned something over the years, something I hadn't fully grasped until now, that love doesn't always mean keeping people close. Sometimes, love means letting go. I glanced over at the kitchen table where the remnants of the trial still lingered. Files, photographs, documents, all the pieces of evidence I had pored over for months. They seemed so insignificant now, as though they were just remnants of a life that was no longer mine to live. The children were fine, yes. They were flourishing in ways I could have only dreamed of when they were younger. Arthur had settled into college life with the determination I always knew he had. Emily had found a part-time job she enjoyed, and Andrea was thriving in her school band. They had found their rhythm, their place in the world, and that was the only thing that mattered now. They were growing up to be strong, independent individuals, the kind of people who would one day change the world. And then there was Ava. She had always been my first love, my daughter, my heart, my pride. And yet the trial had shattered something deep within me. I couldn't just erase the years of absence, the silence, the abandonment. It had been too much, too deep a wound to heal with a simple apology. Eva had come back for the wrong reasons. I had seen it in her eyes during the trial, the way she had fought not for redemption, not for her children, but for something else entirely. The inheritance, the control. She had come back for what she thought she was entitled to, not for the love of her children or the love of me. I hadn't expected to be so crushed by it. I had thought that with the trial behind us, with the ruling in my favor, the tension would dissolve. The resentment would fade. But it didn't. It lingered. And the guilt that followed me, guilt for not being able to save Ava from herself, gnawed at me when I least expected it. It was then that I realized something profound, something I hadn't fully understood until now. The trial hadn't just been about Ava. It had been about me, too. It had been about my own reconciliation with her, with the years of silence, with the choices I had made. I had fought to protect her children, to raise them the way I thought she would have if she'd stayed. But in doing so, I had spent so much time living in the past that I hadn't allowed myself the space to move forward. I hadn't allowed myself to forgive her or to forgive myself. The phone rang, jolting me out of my thoughts. I recognized the number immediately. It was Arthur. "Grandma." He said, his voice steady but full of concern. "I've been thinking about things, about the trial, and I just wanted to make sure you're okay." I felt a lump form in my throat. It wasn't the first time Arthur had called me to check on me, but this time it felt different. It felt like more than just a routine call. It felt like he knew something was off, like he could sense the weight I had been carrying around for weeks. "I'm fine, sweetheart," I said, forcing a smile I hoped he could hear. "I've been keeping busy." But Arthur wasn't fooled. "I know you're still hurting, I can tell. And I know it's not just about the case. It's about everything. You've been carrying so much for so long, and you don't have to carry it alone." His words hit me harder than I expected. I had been so focused on taking care of everyone else, on ensuring that the children's lives were stable, that they had everything they needed, that I had neglected to take care of myself. I had buried my emotions so deep beneath the weight of responsibility that I had forgotten how to feel them, how to confront them. I felt a tear slip down my cheek before I could stop it. I don't know how to let go Arthur. I don't know how to forgive her. And I don't know how to forgive myself for not being able to save her from the mess she made. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then finally, Arthur spoke. "You don't need to save anyone, Grandma. You've done more than enough. You've given us everything. You've loved us. You've cared for us. You're not responsible for what happened to her. You can't fix everything, but you can be at peace knowing that you did what was right for us. You gave us the chance to have a better life, and now it's time for you to let go for your sake. You've carried the weight of that guilt for far too long." His words hit me like a wave crashing over me, breaking the dam I had built around my heart. The tears came freely now, flowing without restraint, as I let myself feel everything I had been holding back for so long. The guilt, the anger, the pain, everything that had weighed me down for years. "I'm proud of you, Grandma." Arthur continued, his voice soft, gentle. "I hope you know that. I hope you know how much we all love you. We're your family, and we're always going to be here. You don't have to do this alone anymore." The weight in my chest lightened just a little. His words were like a balm to a wound I hadn't known how to heal. For the first time in a long time, I felt a shift, a sense of release. It wasn't all gone, not yet, but it was a start. "I love you, Arthur." I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. "I don't know what I would do without you." He chuckled softly. "You'd be just fine, Grandma. You're stronger than you know." When we hung up, I felt a sense of calm wash over me. The storm inside me wasn't over, but it was settling into something more manageable, something I could handle. The road ahead was still long, but at least I wasn't walking it alone. The next few days were quiet, but they were filled with a kind of peace I hadn't known before. I started to allow myself to breathe, to give myself permission to grieve, to heal. I called up old friends I hadn't spoken to in years, rekindling connections I had let slip away in the wake of everything that had happened. I started reading again, something I hadn't done in far too long, losing myself in stories that reminded me that life could still be beautiful, still be worth living. And as for Ava, well, the truth was that I didn't know what the future held for her. I didn't know if we would ever truly reconcile, if she would ever understand the depth of the pain she had caused. But for the first time, I realized that it wasn't my responsibility to fix it. I couldn't fix her. I couldn't make her choices for her. All I could do was move forward, heal, and continue to be the grandmother, the protector that my grandchildren needed me to be. In the end, maybe that was all that mattered. I picked up my phone and texted Arthur, "We've got this, all of us." And this time, I meant it. As I reflect on the journey I've shared with you, I want to offer a message from my heart. Sometimes the hardest thing we can do is let go of the past, of the pain, of the weight we carry for others. In life, we often hold on to guilt, to the belief that we must be the ones to fix everything, to make everything right. But the truth is, we can't control everything, and we're not responsible for the choices others make. What we can do is give ourselves the grace to heal, to forgive, and to move forward with love in our hearts. It's okay to let go, to release the weight of what's beyond our control. We don't have to carry it alone, and we don't have to have all the answers. If you're going through something similar, I encourage you to take a moment for yourself. Breathe. Reflect on your own strength and the love that surrounds you. You are not defined by the burdens you carry, but by how you rise above them. I would love to hear your thoughts, your stories, and your experiences. Have you ever faced a moment where letting go was the only way forward? How did you find peace? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I want to hear from you. Thank you so much for joining me in this journey. Your support and engagement mean the world to me. Let's continue to share, grow, and support each other on this path. I look forward to reading your stories and continuing this conversation. With love and gratitude, thank you for being a part of this. As I reflect on the journey I've shared with you, I want to offer a message from my heart. Sometimes the hardest thing we can do is let go. Let go of the past, of the pain, of the weight we carry for others. In life, we often hold on to guilt, to the belief that we must be the ones to fix everything, to make everything right. But the truth is, we can't control everything, and we're not responsible for the choices others make. What we can do is give ourselves the grace to heal, to forgive, and to move forward with love in our hearts. It's okay to let go, to release the weight of what's beyond our control. We don't have to carry it alone, and we don't have to have all the answers. If you're going through something similar, I encourage you to take a moment for yourself. Breathe. Reflect on your own strength and the love that surrounds you. You are not defined by the burdens you carry, but by how you rise above them. I would love to hear your thoughts, your stories, and your experiences. Have you ever faced a moment where letting go was the only way forward? How did you find peace? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I want to hear from you. Thank you so much for joining me in this journey. Your support and engagement mean the world to me. Let's continue to share, grow, and support each other on this path. I look forward to reading your stories and continuing this conversation. With love and gratitude, thank you for being a part of this.